We're taking a look back at the biggest political turning points, trends, and controversies as we hit rewind on Rising. We've got the power players, scandals, and outrageous decisions that have defined our conversations.
NASA's James Webb Space Telescope released stunning images of outer space this week. Webb is said to be the successor to the Hubble telescope and is supposed to give a deeper glimpse into our universe.
Here to talk about this groundbreaking technology is Dr. Avi Loeb, professor of science at Harvard and the director of the Institute for Theory and Computation. Dr. Loeb, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you with us. I think we were all in awe of the images we were seeing yesterday. Talk to us a little bit about the technology that makes this possible.
Well, the James Webb Space Telescope is unique. First, in terms of its size, it's 6.5 meters in diameter, about 7 times in area than the Hubble Space Telescope that gave us a previous glimpse at the universe. And it's also sensitive in the infrared. If you imagine stars in the very early universe emitting light in the optical visible band or the ultraviolet, that light will be stretched by the cosmic expansion so that it will appear in the infrared for us now. And so this telescope is giving us sensitivity that is unprecedented to look at the very first stars and galaxies in the universe, sort of the scientific genesis of the light, let there be light. And then moreover, it allows us to look for signs of life on other planets, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, in fact, one Twitter user said of the telescope, the James Webb telescope can scan for chemical composition and atmospheres of exoplanets. This is the first one ever done, and it shows atmospheric water vapor. Prepare for alien life reveal on other worlds soon. Is that something we should be thinking about, little green men, or something perhaps less dramatic?
Not really on this planet. This is what is called a gas giant. It's half the mass of Jupiter, so it's made mostly of gas, whereas life as we know it is possible on a planet that has a rocky surface like the Earth with a thin atmosphere on top of it. Definitely not this planet, but we can tell that this planet has water on it, which is remarkable. Of course, water is a necessary ingredient for life as we know it, but we also need a solid surface with a thin atmosphere. So there will be other planets that perhaps will have that. And for example, there is the TRAPPIST system of planets that the Webb will look at. And we look forward to seeing the composition of the atmospheres of some of those rocky planets. And beyond that, there is obviously interest in searching for how planets form and searching for fragments that arrive to the solar system from other planetary systems.
And can you talk about how it is that, because of the nature of what we're doing, we're peering across such a vast distance, we're actually sort of seeing a snapshot in time, right, in the past, because of it being the time it would take that light to reach us. I'm butchering the actual science of it, but can you, an expert, speak to that?
Right. So we know that the universe is expanding. So if we go back in time, there was a time when the density of the universe was infinite. That's called the Big Bang. And we don't know what happened before the Big Bang, how the Big Bang emerged. But we can look at the universe after the Big Bang. And if we look at great distances, it takes light a long time to reach us from those distances, and therefore we see how the universe looked like at early times. It's sort of like a time machine, but in fact we're just looking far away and we see what happened early on far away, which is remarkable. So we can get an image of how the universe looked like. The first image we have is of the so-called cosmic radiation background, cosmic microwave background, 400,000 years after the Big Bang. That's a very short time. Back then, there were no galaxies, no stars. And after that, there was a period that we call the Dark Ages, the cosmic Dark Ages, that were followed by cosmic dawn, when the first stars formed in the universe and sort of lit up like lights on a Christmas tree. And we can look at those. And the Webb allows us the first glimpse at those early times when the first stars and galaxies formed. I started working on this subject about 3 decades ago. Back then, there were only a handful of people interested in it. I was on the first advisory committee that designed the James Webb Space Telescope for that purpose. It was designed to be a telescope sensitive in the infrared, so we can see at light that is arriving to us from far away. The first galaxies were very small. They were sort of like Lego pieces that came together to make a galaxy like our own Milky Way galaxy today. And so they are very challenging to detect because they were faint, intrinsically faint, but also when we look at them, we are looking far away. So we have this telescope, the Webb telescope, made of a lot of segments, 18 segments of beryllium coated with gold that was placed 1 million miles away from Earth. And it is being shielded from sunlight so that it's very cold and can look deep into space without any background from the atmosphere of the Earth or the sun. And it cost us $10 billion, this telescope, but nature is very kind to us. It provides us with natural lenses. We call them gravitational lenses. When you have a cluster of galaxies, a collection of 1,000 galaxies like the Milky Way together, they can focus the light from behind. And then the exceptional sensitivity of the James Webb Space Telescope is aided by a natural telescope, and we can go even deeper. That's the image that was shown in the White House.
So the telescope is you said how far away? How long did it take to get it into position?
Right. So we're looking at an image of the universe from 13 billion years ago. The age of the universe, the Big Bang, took place 13.8. So the universe was an infant back then, and just about 800 million years. We think that the first stars, the first galaxies, started forming around 100 million years, so we still have a way to go. It's like an archaeological dig. The deeper we go, the more ancient are the layers that we uncover.
And you said earlier that that particular planet wasn't likely to yield any evidence of life because it didn't have a rocky surface. But there's also this phrasing of life as we know it, life as we know it. It always strikes me as curious, I gotta say, as a Star Trek fan, to think that we do conceptualize of human life as this kind of or life is, in these very human Earth-centric terms. Is there not the possibility, or is there any interrogation into what it would look like for life to develop on a gas giant, or to be kind of very different in form, non-corporeal life, different kinds of expressions of life? Is there a way to even think about and identify and try to search for those kinds of things as we get greater and greater capacity to look deeper and deeper into the universe?
That's an excellent question. And one thing I learned by being a scientist is that we should be modest. I call it cosmic modesty because nature is more imaginative than we are. And it's quite possible that there are forms of life very different than we find here on Earth. For example, most of the objects that are rocky are actually far away from a host star, and they are completely frozen. But underneath the layer of ice on their surface, there could be an ocean. And the question is there life in that ocean? Are there fish? And there are some satellites or moons of planets in the solar system, like Enceladus or Europa, that are thought to potentially have life under the icy surface. It will be difficult for us to drill that surface, but we can see plumes of gas coming out, geysers, and we can search whether there are any indications for life underneath the ice. But also in the gas giants, it's possible that there are different forms of life than we are used to. And there was discussions about phosphine on Venus, that perhaps in the clouds of Venus, there are droplets of water that carry life in them. Very different from what we see on Earth, because the surface of Venus is too hot to maintain liquid water. And, the sky's the limit in that sense. There could be many other routes towards life that we don't even imagine at the moment. I very much hope that, seeing what happens in world politics, that there is intelligence higher than ours out there. So anyone frustrated by what happens in DC may just stay tuned, because we might learn something from a smarter kid on our cosmic block.
Well, thank you so much, Professor, for shedding some light on these wondrous images and describing them in such literary quality. So we appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We'll have more Rising right after this.
Are aliens traveling to Earth using dark energy propulsion? Well, Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb wrote a paper last year about how gravity and dark energy could hypothetically be manipulated to enable humans to travel through space. So are aliens using this same system? Here to discuss this possibility is Dr. Avi Loeb himself. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So last time we talked, you were on your boat the South Atlantic. Is that right, or South Pacific?
Yeah, Pacific.
Okay, and you were dredging up these spherical objects from the ocean floor that you argue are interstellar in nature. In other words, they came from outside of the solar system and ended up dispersing into these tiny particles. Remind us again of what evidence exists that you think suggests that those are part of extraterrestrial life.
Well, this meteor that was more than half a meter in size was spotted by US government satellites back in 2014, almost a decade ago. It was moving very fast, actually faster than 95% of all the stars in the vicinity of the sun when it was outside the solar system. It came from interstellar space based on its speed, the speed recorded by the US Space Command. And moreover, it had material strength that was tougher than all the space rocks cataloged by NASA over the past decade. So that raised the possibility that it's a Voyager-like meteor. In other words, imagine our own spacecraft, Voyager, leaving the solar system and colliding with a planet like the Earth. It would appear as a meteor. And the question is the unusual material strength and speed of that object testimony to the fact that it's artificial, technological in origin. So we went to the Pacific Ocean to retrieve the materials from this object. We found 700 spherules. These are molten droplets from the surface of the object when it exploded over the Pacific Ocean. We brought them back to Harvard University. We used the best mass spectrometer that the world has to offer, and we now have the analysis results that will be discussed in a press release tomorrow, Tuesday, August 29th, 2023. I can give you the punchline. The punchline is basically the title of my book. And this book appears tomorrow as well.
So Interstellar, is that a suggestion that you have some confirmation that this is, in fact, interstellar particles that are evidence of some intelligent life from outside of our solar system?
Well, there are two fundamental questions. First, is the material itself from outside the solar system? That's the question that we are addressing in this new scientific paper, which was just submitted for publication. The second is, of course, whether this object was technological in origin. And the best way to address that second question would be to find a big piece of the object. That will be our follow-up expedition, because you can easily tell the difference between a piece of a rock and a technological gadget that may have buttons on it.
Now, at the end of last month, it seemed like, I mean, I don't want to characterize it as a hit piece, but the New York Times published a paper which included some criticisms from some of your colleagues about your work, people who questioned whether or not these spherical objects really are what you believe them to be, and questioning some of the math that is included in the trajectories as you've been analyzing, why you believe it's interstellar, what would actually happen if an interstellar object at the velocity that you described hit the Earth? Would there be anything left at all? And I want to give you an opportunity to respond to the argument that there is some inaccuracy here that would suggest that this is not, in fact, evidence of extraterrestrial life.
Well, I don't need to respond because I have the material and we examined it. And stay tuned for tomorrow. The point is, these people expressed opinions. The US Space Command came forward in a formal letter to NASA more than a year ago, in March 2022, where they said that at the 99.999% are confident that this meteor came from outside the solar system. We went out there, we found the spherules that very likely belong to this meteor, and moreover, we analyzed their composition. Irrespective of the speed, we can tell if the materials are different from solar system materials. And, it's not a matter of an opinion. I don't need to defend it because we have the materials. You see, there are two other types of people than real scientists. Real scientists seek the evidence, analyze the evidence, all the materials, and get to conclusions. But there are two other types of people. People who have opinions and talk about it forever, and people who are cheering for the work of science. They just publicize science. They talk about science, just like, movie commentators. They don't direct films. They just talk about the films being produced. And you have to distinguish between people who talk and people who walk the walk, who actually do the work of science. I'm talking about a scientific paper that we wrote, that I'm the first author on, submitted for publication with results that took us months to derive based on analysis of data of materials that we have in our possession. Everyone that expressed opinions about this did not have access to those materials.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of interest in this topic right now. In fact, investigative reporter Ross Coulthart claimed to know the, quote, form of non-human biologics recovered by the U.S. government. Let's watch that.
Just a quick question in regards to the non-human intelligence. Do you know what form it's in, and can you tell us?
I do. Well, at least I do know what I've been told, and I'm sorry I can't go there at the moment. I'm working on further revelations to come out very soon. I promise you that when I'm able to talk about that, I will. It's for a very, very good reason. It's to protect largely sources and methods who are helping me, and you'll see why soon.
What are your thoughts on these claims of non-human biologics? Do you think it's possible that those form is actually known by these whistleblowers, or is your work, so different or concentrated in such a different area that it's sort of a totally separate thing?
No. I mean, science is all about the evidence. If the U.S. government has some materials that demonstrate or substantiate these claims, let's see it. But if people just talk about it, it doesn't amount to much because people can fabricate stories. So telling the difference between what people talk about and what is really out there is the key here. It's not a matter of opinions because we are dealing with materials, with something that was retrieved according to Grush. And actually, Grush himself did not witness, according to him, any of those materials. So he just listened to 40 eyewitnesses who told him about these things. And I believe him, he's sincere, but the question is whether they fabricated the story or not. And until we see the evidence, I would not be convinced, because as a scientist, I'm just guided by evidence. There are lots of people who talk, but let's keep our eyes on the ball, as they say in basketball.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, because you would expect that some of the witnesses would not just be, let's say, fighter pilots who saw an identified craft in the sky, but if what is being said is true about having alien bodies in custody, ships in custody, that I would like to hear that a material analyst, a physicist, a chemist, somebody with a scientific background who I would presume the government set to actually researching and understanding what it is that's before them would be among the whistleblowers, and that the kind of data that we could be getting, the kind of reporting that we could be getting secondhand from those whistleblowers is not just I saw the thing, but there was this life form that was comprised of these elements that aren't available on Earth. Just the way that you've described the alloys in these spherical objects as being of a nature that wouldn't be naturally occurring on the planet. So that's very persuasive. And I understand the people with firsthand knowledge being concerned about coming forward and the nature of a whistleblower and all of that. But I would expect that the nature of some of the disclosures to be a little bit more specific, a little more substantive, a little bit more evidence-based than just, I saw the thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I completely agree. One issue about biology is that, life as we know it here on Earth developed, based on Darwinian evolution, such that it survives under the circumstances here on Earth, where we have an atmosphere, we have liquid water. Going to space is very risky for biological creatures because there is bombardment by cosmic rays, energetic particles, and it takes a long time, for objects moving at the speed of our spacecraft. It would take 500 million years to traverse the Milky Way galaxy. And that's a very long time for any form of life to survive. And of course, we found some worms in the Siberian permafrost that survived for 46,000 years frozen. But our biology is still not advanced enough to allow us to imagine that you can survive a trip of millions or billions of years. And so I would be skeptical until they show us the evidence. And other than that, I would think that it's probably, if there are any functional devices, they would be all about technology, with artificial intelligence. That would be my tendency. And by the way, David Grush ventured into territories that he is not an expert on. He was talking about physics that may explain the kind of things he heard. I can tell you as a physicist, this made very little sense.
Thank you so much for filling us in. Your work fascinates us. We can't wait to have you back very soon. Dr. Loeb, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
UFO spotted? A UFO hovering over Air Force One at LAX during President Joe Biden's fundraising trip to Los Angeles earlier this week has allegedly been caught on camera. Per the Daily Mail, the object was described as a white or silver sphere seen hovering near the president's jet.
According to the Daily Mail, eyewitnesses spotted an LAPD helicopter circling the, quote, stationary object. Joining us to discuss this exciting development is Harvard's esteemed physicist, Dr. Avi Loeb. Welcome, Dr. Loeb, back to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's a great pleasure.
So what do you think we are seeing there on the camera? What could potentially explain this? And could it be an unidentified aerial flying object the way people have expected?
Yeah, the fundamental question is whether it's human-made or something from outside of this Earth. But I would assume that it must be human-made to start with, and then of course we need better data. We need to look at better images and not obtained from just people who happen to be at the right place at the right time, but with scientific instruments. So I reserve my judgment. I should say we have about 100,000 objects over the past month that we monitored with the Galileo Project Observatory at Harvard University, and we are applying very careful analysis using machine learning to figure out whether we are looking at natural objects like birds or human-made objects like drones, balloons, airplanes. And you would expect those human-made objects to be around the president's airplane. The question is whether we recognize it. I mean, our people know what it is. And if not, whether it's some adversarial country. I mean, we know about the Chinese spy balloon that was shut down almost a year ago.
Now, the object's been likened to Reaper drones used in the Middle East. I can imagine a world where the military is monitoring the skies around the president's Air Force One jet, but I can also imagine a world where extraterrestrial life is interested in figures like the President of the United States. There have been increased UFO sightings around nuclear facilities. So I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence as to which side I fall on. I haven't seen Reaper drones in use in person, but which way do you fall when you think about something like this? We assume that it is human man-made, but what do you make of the UFOs being sighted more around nuclear facilities and now potentially the president's Air Force One jet?
Well, I'm just like you. I'm not decided yet because obviously there are people within the military and the intelligence agencies that are talking about objects they cannot identify. And I was at the Washington National Cathedral with Avril Haines, the director of national intelligence. And I asked her, I said, you submitted reports to Congress about these unidentified anomalous phenomena. And you have a bachelor's degree in physics from the University of Chicago. What do you make of these objects? What's your gut feeling? And she said, I don't know. Now, one thing is clear. There are lots of objects in the sky, and most of them are likely to be balloons, drones, airplanes. So we really need to do a very thorough job to exclude the majority of the objects that have simple explanations. And that's what AARO, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, is attempting to do about past reports, hundreds of them. And I visited them a couple of weeks ago in Washington, D.C. They are still of the opinion that only a few % of the objects that they looked into as a result of reports from military or intelligence agencies, only a few % are unidentified. The rest they can figure out. But, it's not so much about the rest. Even if 1 in 1,000 is of extraterrestrial origin, that would have a huge impact on humanity.
When we last checked in with you, Dr. Loeb, I believe you were at sea in your project to investigate debris from objects that may have crashed into the ocean that you think could possibly show an extraterrestrial origin or an off-world origin. Could you give us an update on how that project is going?
Right. So we went back in June for 2 weeks in search of materials from the first recognized interstellar meteor, an object the size of a watermelon that collided with Earth, and the fireball that it created as a result of its friction on air was spotted by U.S. government satellites. And we knew the location. We went there with a ship and scooped the ocean floor for any magnetic particles that may have been melted off the surface of this object. And amazingly, we found 750 such droplets that some of them are background, some came from other meteors, but we found a unique type of spherules, these droplets, that was never seen before in terms of its material composition. And I'm talking about 60 elements from the periodic table. We are now in the process of summarizing all the results. Initially, a few months ago, we released some preliminary results from studying just a tenth of all the spherules that we found, but by now we went through all of them. And we are now working on the paper that will include all the data. It was a lot of work, 6 months work worth of analysis at the laboratory of my colleague at Harvard, Stein Jacobson. He's a geochemist, has some of the best instruments in the world, mass spectrometers and imagers and so forth. And we also benefited from the X-ray fluorescence analyzer in the laboratory of Roald Tagel at the Bruker Corporation in Berlin. So we will summarize all these results, but the bottom line is we found near the meteor path a type of molten droplets that was never seen before, and that's probably of extrasolar origin because it doesn't match the composition of rocks on Earth, Mars, the Moon, asteroids, anything within the solar system. And the next expedition that we are starting to plan right now would be to find bigger pieces. Now we know where to go. And of course, if you find a bigger piece, you can tell the difference between a rock and a technological gadget, because a gadget may have buttons on it. And if we do find something like that, the question will be whether to press a button.
Are there any other ways you can determine whether something was created by intelligent life or is a material naturally occurring in another solar system?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to tell that is from a big piece of the object or coming close to an object that is still functional, like an unidentified anomalous phenomenon. So obviously, if you see an object maneuvering in ways that cannot be reproduced by our technological products, and you can tell that it's technological because it has screws and maybe even a label made on some exoplanet, it would be clear beyond any reasonable doubt that we're dealing with a piece of technology from another place outside the solar system. And then the question would be, what information is it seeking? What is its goal? And it may be purely technological with artificial intelligence, so we might use our own AI systems to figure out extraterrestrial AI systems. Another possibility is that we find space trash, an object that is not functional anymore. For example, this meteor that, if we find a piece of it at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, it will obviously not be functional because it exploded in the atmosphere. But you can still learn a lot about the object itself. And, the fundamental question is whether the government has already such information, because the government monitors the sky all the time. Astronomers look at small regions of the sky and focus on very distant sources of light. And if something flies overhead, astronomers disregard it. So it's really the Galileo project, the first time that there is a scientific study of the full sky at all times. But it's possible the government has its day job for national security purposes to do exactly that. So it's quite possible the government has some information. And we heard from David Grush when he testified in front of the House of Representatives that he believes there are programs for retrieval and reverse engineering of alien spacecraft. And I actually had a conversation with him a couple of weeks ago for more than an hour. And I tried to get a better sense of what he knows about the government programs, but he says that he cannot really talk about it for legal reasons. So unfortunately, based on the publicly available information, I'm with you. I'm split. I'm not clear yet. I mean, it's really all about the evidence.
Yes.
And I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I so agree, and I wonder if you feel this way, and we'll let you go in a second, but just quickly, it can be frustrating. I mean, it's so interesting to hear people come forward and testify that they have sometimes direct knowledge or sometimes slightly indirect knowledge that they've talked to someone who has seen either evidence of remains of extraterrestrial life, and that the government has that, and it's like being hidden somewhere. And then my next question, okay, where's that facility? Let's go there. And we never get the actual, yes, it's here, or they'll say I'm being told I can't talk about this, and I want to, okay, well, who's telling you that? Let's haul that person before Congress. It starts to become very, very frustrating from a genuine interest, right, and a perspective that this could very much be real, and I would totally believe that the government could have this information and try to cover it up. But at some point, someone needs to come forward with some actual verifiable facts about it. What's your sense of that?
Exactly. And also it should get to the attention of scientists like myself, because my day job is to figure out what's outside the solar system. The government's day job is to figure out what's produced by adversarial countries. It's a very different job. And if they have information about my day job, I would like to know it and help them figure it out. And it's really the job of science, because anything about the universe should be shared by all humans. All the information we know about the Big Bang, the expansion of the universe, was never classified. And this is of the same category. We just need to figure out whether we have a neighbor. And I should say that when I lean in the direction of skepticism, I suddenly have an event like the one happened a few days ago when I had a group of people from Washington, D.C., in my home for a visit to discuss some other physics project. And one of them was a high-level official, former official in Lockheed Martin. And I just wanted to clear my understanding. And I asked him, well, there is this testimony about potentially corporations or outside entities that are outside government that have possession of materials of interest in terms of extraterrestrial spacecraft. And I expected him to say, no, that's complete nonsense. Let's move on to another topic. But instead, he said, it may not be wrong. And so, I hear both views. People tell me that they have heard, that they know that something is going on, but they don't show the evidence. And at the same time, when I try to get more information about what's known, I never get very far. And so out of frustration, as a scientist, I realized the sky is not classified, the oceans are not classified, and so I'm trying to figure out the answer myself. But it would save me decades of my time. Life is short. I would like to know if the government has it already, because then I'll be glad to help them figure it out, and I will not have to waste decades of my time trying to do it if they already have it.
Dr. Avi Loeb, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.